Who would have thought that the control tool used in the reign of terror in the French Revolution, favoured by the two Napoleons, and every other tinpot dictator would ever be used in Australia, of all countries? I'm talking about Bill Shorten'S constitutional plebiscite. And by the way, as I explained at the National Conference, we're not anti-Labour. Indeed, all the greatest Labour leaders have been constitutional monarchists. We can demonstrate that. As to the use of constitutional plebiscites, we were the first country in the world to use the Swiss referendum, the opposite of the plebiscite, to form our federation. As ACM has always said, the use of a plebiscite in Australia for constitutional purposes is always wrong. I'll come to that in a moment. Now, when the politicians use the constitutional plebiscite, you know one thing: you'll know that they're up to no good. Our fears on this were proven when we saw that the threatened plebiscite is based on what any politician would know is a lie. The lie is that we don't already have what ACM has already pointed out: an Australian as head of state. The final terms of the instruction to the incoming Labor government were settled at the December National Conference of the ALP. It was to give some life to the half-dead politicians' republic. It confirms a convoluted, devious and fraudulent process. This begins with a plebiscite. If successful, there'll be a second plebiscite. Note that those who are happy with what we have will effectively lose their vote in that second plebiscite. That's the plan: to trick the people into voting yes in the first plebiscite and thus disenfranchise the majority in the second one. The plan is to get rid of you. Now, just on plebiscites, a maverick monarchist used to say he wasn't opposed to good plebiscites. The fact is, when it comes to the Constitution, there's no such thing as a good plebiscite. The difference between a plebiscite and a referendum is simple. With a referendum, the details are on the table before you vote. With a plebiscite, the details are handed out afterwards. It's like giving the politicians a blank cheque. That's why our founders wouldn't have a bar over the plebiscite for constitutional matters, nor should we. Now, Bill Shorten knows that he still needs a referendum after all these plebiscites, unless, of course, they work out how to short-circuit that. But what he's doing is the act of a constitutional vandal, asking for a vote of no confidence in one of the world's best constitutions, and then having nothing to put in its place. The terms of his plebiscite are fraudulent. It's along these lines: are you in favour of Australia becoming a republic with an Australian head of state? Now, the implication, the dog whistle, is that we don't already have an Australian as head of state. Every politician knows this is untrue. It's a lie. And if there are some who don't know this, they shouldn't be in Parliament. The term head of state is not a constitutional office. It's a diplomatic term used in relation to presidential, royal and vice-regal travel. It only relates to that. It's governed by public international law and not constitutional law. Every government, Labour or coalition, tells the world that the Governor-General is our Australian head of state. As I say, the term's not in the Constitution. It's diplomatic, governed by public international law. The Republicans know that if they can mislead the people on this, they can then argue that only in a republic can we have this Australian as head of state. They know this is a lie, and that's because we've already got an Australian as head of state. ACM has always pointed this out. The Republicans are using this because it's the only possible reason they have for change. Note that on this, ACM doesn't chop and change. On all important matters, we are consistent. And on this, we've assembled a team of top experts who all agree the Governor-General is head of state. They're not what could be called bush lawyers. These people are experts who know exactly what they're talking about. And they will show conclusively and beyond any doubt whatsoever that the Governor-General is the Australian head of state. Head of state, not some fancy executive head of state, head of state. This is a fraudulent plebiscite. It's based on the lie that the Governor-General is not the Australian head of state. It goes against the clear intention of the Constitution that the people be consulted through a referendum and not a plebiscite. This now is a report from ACM, which was the engine room of the victorious No case in 1999. So please do join us. There are no fees. There's never been any fees. We're audited every year since we were formed. Just go to www.norepublic.com.au and do join us, because we have the runs on the board. And until next time, I'm David Flint, and I'm National Convener of Australians for Constitutional Monarchy.